The scent of copper and salt fills the air. Blood. There's so much of it. It soaks into the cheap motel carpet, curling around the edges of broken furniture like an artist's abstract masterpiece. In the dim, flickering light, Dexter Morgan stares down at what remains of the man beneath him. His hands, sticky and trembling, clutch the knife in a grip that feels too tight, too desperate. His heart pounds, not from guilt, not from fear of getting caught, but from something else. Something raw, something primal. He should feel satisfaction, relief, but it's messy, sloppy. The wounds aren't clean. This wasn't a swift, precise execution. It was rage, pure, untethered instinct. The man below was screaming, flailing, fighting until the last gurgling breath. Dexter had to pin him down, his knee pressing into a fragile ribcage, his hands tightening around the blade, thrusting again, until the noise stopped, until the body was still, until something inside Dexter uncoiled, momentarily fed but never truly sated. This isn't right, or is it? Harry always said he needed rules, structure, code, but Harry's gone, and there is no code. There never was. Just this, a raw, unfiltered hunger that erupts from the depths of something dark and bottomless. And without the code, Dexter finds himself untethered. He runs his fingers across his face, swiping away the beads of sweat dripping from his forehead. He exhales, forcing his breath to steady, to calm the jagged edges of his mind. The bloodstains on his shirt will be a problem. He wasn't careful. This was supposed to be methodical, perfected. Instead, it was uncontrollable chaos. He lets out a soft chuckle, the sound foreign to his own ears. Would Harry even recognize him now? No meticulous plastic wrap. No carefully selected victims. Just a killer cutting his teeth on the Miami night, letting hunger and need guide his blade. No justification. No selection process. Only instinct. Only the kill. The body before him is still warm, the desperate stare frozen in glossy horror. It was a random kill. No weeks of stalking, no careful study of misdeeds. Just a man he saw at a bar. A man whose voice grated at the edges of his nerves, whose laughter felt like nails on his skin. Was he a criminal? Did he deserve it? Does it even matter? Somewhere beyond these blood-soaked motel walls, the city churns with its usual rhythm. Miami never sleeps. A symphony of crime, lust, and consequence. But Dexter isn't concerned with the outside world right now. His fingers twitch. His pulse hums. The kill wasn't enough. It barely scratched the itch. He needs more. He wipes his hands on the man's shirt and stares at his reflection in a dust-clouded mirror. A smear of red coats his cheek like war paint. His eyes, dark voids beneath the dim overhead bulb, scan his own expression as if looking for something. Recognition, humanity. But there is nothing. Just hunger. And the night is still young. The body must be dealt with. His subconscious still clings to the remnants of caution. He pulls himself together, forcing shaky muscles to obey as he retrieves a tarp from the trunk of his car. He wasn't prepared. He didn't plan. Yet some instinct drives his movements, semblances of structure imposed by necessity. He can't leave the body here. Not if he wants to keep doing this. A mess like this would draw attention. Miami Metro would investigate. Deborah, with her razor-sharp intuition and a mouth full of profanity, would tear into the crime scene like a bloodhound. And Batista, good, level-headed, seasoned, would piece things together bit by bit. And then there's Masuka, annoying, perverse, yet brilliant in forensics. The thought of Masuka analyzing his handiwork makes Dexter's stomach churn in something that isn't quite fear. He needs to be better. He needs to be unseen. He drags the body onto the tarp, muscles straining against resistance. Dead weight is heavier than one expects. A lesson learned early, through trial, error, and messy mistakes. He works quickly, wrapping the corpse tight. The ocean is close. The depths will feed tonight. The drive is quiet. Even the ever-present hum of Miami nightlife seems muted through the windshield. The lights blur. The city has no moral compass. Murders happen every night, Disappearances slip through the cracks. One missing man in a sea of corruption means nothing. Dexter grips the steering wheel, knuckles whitening. It should mean something. The dock is deserted, the scent of salt heavy in the air. The water is black, endless, indifferent. Dexter steps to the edge and stares into the abyss. The body, now securely wrapped, waits in the trunk. Should it bother him that there was no real selection process? No hunt? Just impulse? He breathes in, inhales the damp air. There is no voice in his head telling him to stop. No ghost of Harry whispering caution. Only the pulse. Only the need. Harry wanted him to be something controlled, calculated. A monster on a leash. But Dexter is starting to wonder. Was Harry protecting the world from him? Or was he merely trying to ease his own guilt? The water welcomes the body with a muted splash. The ripples fade. The night continues. And Dexter wonders how long he can hide if even he doesn't know where this will end. Back at Miami Metro, the rattle of keyboards and the low murmur of voices create a familiar backdrop as Dexter walks into the forensics lab the next morning. He keeps his expression neutral, his posture relaxed. Practiced mask. He's done this 1,000 times. But the unease lingers, coiled deep in his chest. Morning, sunshine. Masuka greets with his usual smirk, leaning over the microscope. You hear about the body dumped near the docks last night? Dexter's heart skips. Impossible. There should have been no evidence left behind. No, I haven't, Dexter replies evenly, stepping forward just enough to scan the report on the desk. The victim's face stares back. Blue lips. Waterlogged flesh. His body. And then comes the twist of fate. Coast Guard found him before the fish did, Batista says, walking in with a cup of coffee. Guess someone didn't weigh him down enough. Sloppy work. Sloppy. The word digs into Dexter's brain like a parasite. Sloppy. Uncontrolled. Everything that his kills weren't supposed to be. Harry would be disgusted. But Harry isn't here. And now Miami Metro is investigating his kill. His pulse hums in his ears as he forces a neutral expression, glancing at the forensic data, scanning every detail for mistakes, for missteps, for anything that could link him to the body currently lying cold in the morgue. Looks like blunt force trauma, numerous stab wounds. Pretty brutal, Masuka comments, shaking his head. Guy really pissed off the wrong person. Dexter forces a smile. Yeah, looks like it. But inside, the dark passenger stirs. What happens next? How does he fix this? How does he keep this hunger from unraveling him completely? He doesn't know. The chill of the morgue seeps into Dexter's skin as he peers down at his own handiwork. The body lies stretched out, wounds angry and exposed beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. He should have been fish food by now, stripped to the bone by the relentless ocean. Instead, here he is laid bare for scrutiny, for investigation, for discovery. Masuka stands on the opposite side of the table, gloved hands hovering over the corpse, his eyes gleaming with morbid curiosity. Guess whoever did this didn't take Bio 101, he muses, poking at the waterlogged flesh. Didn't weigh him down properly. Amateur move. Probably panicked. Sloppy, Batista murmurs again, sipping from his coffee. The word stings. Dexter forces himself to breathe, to analyze, to compartmentalize. His fingers twitch at his sides, desperate for something to hold, something to stabilize him. He locked his instincts away, tucked the hunger into a dark place where it could fester unseen. But now, standing over his own mistake, the walls of containment feel thin. A mistake. He isn't supposed to make mistakes. The code, his imaginary leash, the illusion of control, never existed. Only need. And need is unpredictable. What's the time of death? He asks, keeping his voice steady. Preliminary guess? Late last night. Maybe early morning. Masuka replies, snapping off his gloves. Gonna run tox. Check for prints. Whoever did this wasn't thinking straight. He smirks. Lucky for us. Dumb criminals make good cases. Dexter nods absently, biting back the irony. Would they find anything? Blood traces in the motel? A security camera near the docks catching a glimpse of his car? His body is here now, placed under the microscope of a department full of trained professionals. His colleagues, his family, his sister. A breath catches in his throat as he looks toward the door. And there's Deborah, her frame tense in the doorway, hands planted on her hips. "What do we got?" she asks, voice sharp, all business. She steps forward, gaze sweeping over the corpse, assessing the scene like a predator sizing up its kill. Dexter swallows. He sees the wheels turning in her head, the connections forming, the instincts she has honed since childhood kicking in. The way she always used to look at his science projects, at his broken toys and dissected animals, trying to understand what made them tick. "Holy fucking shit," she mutters, leaning in to get a closer look at the wounds. Somebody went full psycho on this guy. Dexter stiffens. It's just a reaction, just an offhand comment. But the weight of her words sits heavy in his gut. Full psycho. No calculated precision. No righteous justice. Just blood spilled recklessly. "It's personal," she continues, turning to Batista. "You don't stab someone this many times unless you're making a goddamn point. This guy wasn't just a target, he was a goddamn outlet." "An outlet? You think maybe a crime of passion?" Batista asks, rubbing his chin. "Someone who knew the victim?" Deborah exhales, shaking her head. Maybe not. This is disconnected. Almost random. The MO is messy. She taps her fingers against the cold steel table. But there's something underneath all this rage. Something controlled in the body disposal, even if it was a shit job. She looks up at Masuka. "Any sign of hesitation wounds? Any defensive injuries?" Masuka shakes his head. "None that I can see so far. Whoever did this didn't hesitate." His lips curl. They were having fun. Dexter doesn't flinch, but inside, something coils tight. Fun. He wouldn't call it that. He doesn't have the words for what it is. Release? Balance? A necessary function? Whatever it is, they're circling too close. Too close to him. "Killer's not done," Deborah mutters almost to herself. Whoever the sick bastard is, this wasn't just a one-time thing. Dexter's throat tightens. It wasn't. It isn't. He forces himself to step back, to act normal, to observe just like everyone else. But he feels their voices wrapping around him. An encroaching noose. A slow suffocation. He needs to fix this. He needs to get ahead. "Excuse me," he mutters, stepping away, needing space. But as he turns toward the hallway, his shoulder brushes against Deborah's. She flinches, just slightly, almost imperceptibly, before looking at him. Her eyes narrow. "You okay, Dex?" For the first time in his life, he isn't sure how to answer. He forces out a breath, shaping it into a measured chuckle. "Yeah, just brutal case." Deborah watches him a beat longer, something unreadable crossing her face. Then she nods. "Yeah, no shit." He steps into the hallway, retreating toward the sanctity of his lab. But even as he puts distance between himself and the crime scene, the unease doesn't leave. This is how it begins. A trail of unstable choices, of mistakes that could unravel everything. He needs to find control. He needs the next kill. But this time, he can't afford to be sloppy. The walls of his lab feel tighter than usual, the sterile air pressing down on him like a weight. He forces himself into routine, sliding on gloves, adjusting microscope lenses, logging data into the system. Muscle memory, a practiced rhythm designed to keep his thoughts rigid, contained. But it isn't working. His mind keeps snagging on frayed edges. Masuka's smirk, Batista's calm deduction, Deborah's narrowed gaze. He tampered with the evidence. It should have been gone, erased by the ocean's depth. Instead, it stares back at him from the morgue's cold slab, inviting scrutiny, dissection. What happens if they find something? A fiber, a partial print, a sliver of DNA he failed to erase in his frenzy? No rules, no discipline. Harry's warnings rise like bile in his throat. Without order, without control, the hunt collapses under its own weight. He presses his palms against the table, breathing slow, measured. He needs a way out. Miami Metro investigations rarely stall. If they find a lead, A connection. If the body speaks too loudly, if Deborah pries too deep, he won't have time to course correct. His existence hinges on the ignorance of those around him. The illusion of normalcy must remain intact. The next steps must be calculated. A knock at the door splits his thoughts. He schools his face, relaxing his shoulders before glancing up. It's Deborah. "You've been weird today," she says, stepping in without an invitation. Her arms are crossed, her stance stiff, cop mode activated. He offers her a neutral smile, something carefully measured, yet she doesn't seem convinced. "Weird how?" he asks, feigning curiosity. She exhales, shaking her head. "I don't know. Just something's off with you. That body got you rattled." The weight of truth lurches behind his ribs, pressing against his carefully constructed facade. A misstep here could widen the crack in his foundation. She knows him, not in the way others do, but deeper, instinctively. From childhood to now, through every lie, every mask, Deborah has always been the closest thing to real family. And real family sees the fractures even when they're painted over. "I guess it's just jarring," he says finally, matching the tone of someone fazed but not unsettled. A man reacting as he should to an act of senseless brutality. Seeing the body like that, the rage in the wounds, he shakes his head. It's not like the clean kills we usually see. The words leave his mouth before he can stop them, and Deborah tilts her head. Her eyes lock onto his face, calculating. "Yeah," she mutters, frowning. "Exactly." She lingers a moment longer before stepping back, hands on her hips. "Anyway, we're pulling traffic cam footage along the docks. Maybe we'll catch something useful." A slow, creeping chill works its way up Dexter's spine. Traffic cams. A silent observer embedded in Miami's infrastructure, always watching. He left nothing behind at the motel except maybe stray drops of blood. But the docks, the trunk lift, the disposal, the careless way he assumed the darkness would shield him. How much did the city see? "That's good," he says, forcing a nod. "Hopefully you find something." "Yeah," she says, gaze still on him when it should have shifted elsewhere. Her gut is stirring. An itch in the back of her mind, an unsettled notion she hasn't put words to yet. But it's there, watching, waiting for a crack to widen. She leaves, and the moment the door snaps shut, Dexter exhales, long and slow. He needs distance. The lab feels hazardous, a crime scene of its own waiting to be uncovered. Night drapes over Miami by the time he escapes, sliding into his car, gripping the wheel with enough force to blanch his knuckles. This is getting dangerous. Too dangerous. He's sloppy, unfocused. The feeding isn't working, the hunger remains, but the satisfaction doesn't. It's all instinct, all reaction. No order, no precision. Just chaos sealed inside moments of blood and breath. Harry was right. Without the code, he is nothing but impulse. A blade without direction. A hunger without control. Predator who doesn't know when to stop. His hands tighten on the wheel. The weight of the night presses against his lungs, thick and stifling, as the neon blur of the city streaks past. The itch claws at his ribs, scalding and raw. He needs the next one. Needs the release, the silence that comes after the struggle. The way the world narrows to a pinpoint of clarity when the blade finds home. But no more sloppiness. No more chaos. He must impose his own order. Build his own law in the absence of Harry's. And he knows exactly where to start. The bar is dimly lit, the kind of place where regret pools at the bottom of empty glasses and anonymity is the only real currency. Dexter slides onto a stool, scanning the room, his mind sharpening. This has to be different. The last kill was impulsive, frantic, unmeasured. He needs to relearn patience. The man 2 seats down is loud, animated, fingers curling around his drink in a grip that suggests anger restrained by alcohol's dull embrace. He talks to another man, laughing in short, mirthless bursts, his movements twitchy, erratic. His knuckles are scarred, calloused, like someone accustomed to using fists as words. Dexter watches the way he speaks, the little jolts of aggression buried in his gestures. The way his posture shifts when a woman walks past, predatory like muscle memory. He can work with this. He nurses a drink he doesn't care for, listening without appearing to. The man complains about debts, about people who don't pay, about how he handled it before. The bar hums around them, an atmosphere of subdued chaos. But Dexter only hears the static behind his ribs, the slow-building pressure of certainty. This one fits, not perfectly, not the way Harry's process would have dictated, but close enough. Close enough to be more than impulse, close enough to be order. And he needs that. The night stretches on, unraveling in sluggish, calculated steps. Dexter doesn't follow him immediately. He waits, observing, learning the rhythm of this man's life. In another world, in another life, he would have taken a week, studied patterns, learned weaknesses. But there is no luxury in this existence, only necessity. The opportunity presents itself as the man stumbles into the alley behind the bar. Phone pressed to his ear, voice dripping with irritation. Private conversation, isolated, easy. Dexter follows, each step deliberate, controlled. The city hums beyond the alley walls, indifferent, unaware of the silent predator slipping through its veins. The man doesn't hear him until it's too late. The knife slides B.S., slipping into momentary quiet. Better. Not perfect, but better. He works fast, methodical. The mistakes he made before will not be repeated. The tarp waits in the trunk. The ocean calls again. But this time, precaution takes precedence over hunger. This time, there will be no evidence left behind. Miami will not see this one, and Miami Metro will not find him. He slides the body into the trunk, closing it with a satisfying click. The hunger recedes, distant now, quieted, like a beast fed just enough to sleep. But it will wake again. It always does. The city exhales in neon and silence as Dexter drives. The body secured in the trunk, his grip steady on the wheel. Control, restraint. These words repeat in his head like a mantra. He got through tonight without mistakes, without recklessness, without the sloppiness of before. The kill was practiced, measured, almost methodical, almost right, but not quite. The hunger settles, dulled at the edges but never gone. It never truly fades. It only waits. The dock is empty the way it should be. Dark waves lap hungrily at the pilings, the scent of brine thick in the humid air. Dexter steps out, opening the trunk, staring down at the cooling corpse inside. He worked quickly, efficiently. No stray fibers, no residual evidence. This time he made sure. Restraint. But as he lifts the body, something gnaws at the edge of his consciousness. A memory distant but pressing. Harry's voice, full of quiet warning. Asterisk, it's not the killing that will get you caught, Dexter. It's the mistakes, the missteps, the sloppiness. Asterisk. He ignored that warning before. He won't do it again. The body slips into the water with barely a sound. The wrappings weighted, secured this time. No loose ends. No remnants for the ocean to spit back onto the shore. He watches the ripples fade, waits until there's nothing left but the open water and his own reflection staring back from the surface. A cold satisfaction creeps beneath his skin. This is how it has to be. No code, no rules, but control must exist. There must be a balance between hunger and survival. And he is learning. He drives home in silence, the city a blur of empty streets and humming streetlights. The weight in his chest is lighter now, his mind quieter. The kill did what it was supposed to. He can breathe again. But as he slips into his apartment, locking the door behind him, a different weight settles into his bones. This is not over. This is never over. The next morning, the world continues. Asterisk, asterisk. Miami Metro hums with the usual energy. Detectives moving from desk to desk. Cases unfolding in stacks of paperwork and muttered conversations. Dexter slips back into routine, coffee, analysis, carefully manufactured expressions. He is another cog in the machine, present but unremarkable. Or so he hopes. Morning, Morgan. Deborah's voice cuts through the din, and when he looks up, she's watching him. Not with suspicion, not yet, but with something else. An itch she can't quite scratch. "Morning, Deb," he replies evenly, keeping his hands busy with a file. She lingers a beat before leaning against his desk, crossing her arms. "Got a weird one today," she says. "Guy from last night. Stab wounds, but this time the body's gone. Poof, like he never existed." He keeps his eyes from narrowing, manages a small frown of feigned interest. "No remains. Nada," she mutters, shaking her head. "No body, no evidence, no fucking nothing. Like the guy just disappeared." She doesn't know how right she is. "That's unusual," Dexter muses. He slides a non-committal glance toward Batista, who's flipping through case files with his usual calm efficiency. "We're checking traffic cams again," Deborah continues, trying to piece together if anyone saw him leave the bar. Again with the cameras. Again with the constant, watchful eyes of the city. How had Harry managed this for so long? How had he kept Dexter hidden from this relentless gaze? "With any luck, we'll catch something," Deborah adds, standing straight, her attention still lingering on him for a fraction longer than necessary. He pretends not to notice. "Hope so," he says with a practiced nod, and she moves on, disappearing into the noisy blur of the station. He exhales slowly. Too close. Again. His kills will have to evolve. The patterns, the disposal, everything must adapt. No more mistakes. No more threads left hanging. Night falls again. Asterisk asterisk. The urge simmers below his skin. But tonight, he resists. He forces himself to wait, to let the tension wind tight. Impulsivity wrecks planning. Recklessness invites disaster. If he does this, if he keeps doing this, it must be perfected. He forces himself into routine. Autopsy reports. Late hours reviewing blood patterns. The station empties out in waves until only the hum of buzzing lights remains. And then footsteps. "Jesus, you never go home." Deborah's voice rings out as she steps into the lab, arms crossed, exhaustion creasing the edges of her features. "Neither do you," Dexter counters, smirking. "Yeah, well, I'm a cop, you're a nerd." She smirks back, but there's something beneath the teasing. A quiet study. She steps closer, letting out a breath. "Look, Dex, She stops, glancing away for a second before shaking her head. "Never mind." "What?" he prompts, keeping his tone light. "It's just, I don't know." She exhales through her nose, frustration flickering in the furrow of her brow. "You've been weird. Ever since that damn body at the docks." His stomach knots. "Weird how?" "I don't fucking know." She blows out a laugh, but there's no humor in it. "That's the problem. It's just something. A gut feeling. A gut feeling." Harry had always warned him about instincts, how they worked both ways. And Deborah's instincts were sharper than most. He feigns amusement, shaking his head. "You work too hard. Go home. Get some rest." She sighs. Yeah, maybe." But she doesn't move immediately. She lingers, eyes searching his face. For what? Finally, she shakes her head again and turns for the door. "Good night, Dex." "Good night, Deb." The door swings shut, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Cannot continue like this. Asterisk asterisk. The scrutiny, the mistakes, the hunger gnawing away between kills, clouding his judgment, pulling him toward recklessness. He needs order. Not a code, not Harry's rules, but something. A system, a balance, control. And he will find it. Asterisk asterisk. The next kill will be perfect. Absolutely perfect. No mistakes. No loose ends. He will not allow himself to fail again. The dark passenger purrs in agreement, and Dexter finally embraces it.